We're going to continue, and I'm not going to make a long introduction here, but Stefanie Schroedter is Professor of Music and Movement, which is of course very appropriate to the topic of the conference, at the University for Music and Performing Arts Vienna, which would be like a sister institution to this university in Austria. And she's now part of the Artistic Research Center, but she's been working in dance theory and dance studies for a long time. And we're very happy to have her here.
Thank you very much for this introduction, and also thank you very much for the invitation to this very exciting conference. It's hard to start with a dry lecture after such a lively performance. But I will do my best, and also, thank you very much, because 1 week ago, unfortunately, I got a flu, and so I'm not in my best condition, but I hope I can manage everything. Can you hear me? Yeah? No? It's okay? Yeah? Okay. So, perhaps as a little introduction, when I got into a train in Salzburg, I think that's better now. I was well prepared. I had my paper with me. It was finished. And then I was in the train. I started thinking, and everything changed. Especially the structure. And when I got out in Stuttgart, so I had a completely different structure of my paper. So, and I couldn't have a chance to print it out again. So it will be a little bit improvised, but I think it's good because then the ideas stay flexible. And so please just interrupt me if you would like to have from a topic more, because there's a broad theme, a topic, and I have a lot of material, and if you like to have more from a special topic, just interrupt and say more or say less, whatever. So let's make it a little bit flexible, and you can also ask questions, give remarks, whatever. So let's try to make it a little bit more flexible, since my paper is also now a little bit more flexible. I would start with some general remarks on relations between music and movement, because there is no question that music has something to do with movement. We move when we make music. First of all, these movements are required to produce sounds. For example, the pressure that must be exerted on a key in order to make a string vibrate. But we also use movements to implement a certain sound idea or to create nuances of expression, and thus to further our artistic intention. To the extent that it makes sense at all to distinguish between primarily functional and expressive formative motions, these movements that are especially intended for sound production are not necessarily performative movements, although they can become such, as we saw just before. And I have another example, if you like. Perhaps you know this performance by Xavier Leroy, his conducting of Les Sacres du Printemps. Do you know? So we don't need to see it. Perhaps just a second, because I think it's enough. So just to make a distinction between movements for just making sounds and performative movements. And there's a fluid border, of course. Apart from these movements for sound production, music stimulates us almost involuntarily to make small gestures such as rhythmic rocking or tapping, or to move with the whole body, which is dance in the most primordial sense. That means independent of specific forms or styles. Music moves us, but not always visible. It also triggers invisible inner motions, such as imagination, an important source of artistic and creative work, and emotions that sometimes literally drive us from Latin e movere, to move out, to set into motion. This is the reason why I make a distinction between movement as a visible force, energy, and motion, which also includes emotions and imaginations that can become visible but need not. And this might be a reason why not only our sense of hearing is activated while listening to music, but sometimes also our sense of sight, touch, or our sense of taste and smell, and above all, our often overlooked sense of movement, also known as kinesthesia. In this respect, music is directly linked to motions that do not primarily relate to music production, but above all to our music reception, and which in turn allows valuable insight into our music perception, that is our hearing and listening. I'm especially interested in a kinesthetic mode of listening, in which moving and listening are closely linked, so that sounds immediately evoke ideas, imaginations, perhaps also feelings of movement, and vice versa. Movements immediately evoke ideas, imaginations of sounds. We can return to this topic later on. In addition, gestures and motions are also inscribed in music, so to speak, be it because composers refer to dance models that they musically abstract, that is, stylize, or be it because they more or less consciously take up ideas of motion that then provide a metaphoric basis for their compositions. For example, here I have a composition by Kaya Zariaho, a ballet composition, and it's the first journey. The first movement, journey, called Journey, entitled Journey. This was a composition for a choreography by Carolyn Carlson, and I guess it was a big misunderstanding between both artists. And I saw this choreography. Carolyn Carlson made something completely different because she didn't want to imitate these movements. So I think it was a very interesting experiment. Pursuing this approach, one can also speak of an inner motion of the music itself, of a motion in music, or from the perspective of perception of music as motion, which therefore has also a specific audible but not visible corporeality. Considerations in this regard focus on our cognitive understanding of music, analyzed by music theory or music psychology. These fields are recently increasingly influenced by embodied cognitive science, especially the so-called 4E cognition or enactivism, which goes far beyond primarily musical issues, investigating relations to our everyday world of experience in order to be able to draw conclusions about our conceptualization of music. We can come back to this topic also later on. This approach seems to be fundamental for a praxeological or analytical approach to the interweaving of music and sound and performative movement, far beyond the stage, but especially focused on dance choreography. Against this backdrop, my main hypothesis for the following considerations is that the interweaving of music and performative movement provides valuable insights into cultural and/or technological developments. The latter can be read from them, so to speak, especially when it comes to the interweaving of music and performative movement, which relates to social and political topics of our everyday lives, not necessarily obviously, but more on a subtle, conceptual, structural level. And now I come to the field which examines such topics. Research into the interweaving, I call it research into the interweaving of sound and performative movement. While in ethnology, music and movement analysis have been carried out in close proximity since the middle of the 20th century on the basis of thick descriptions after Clifford Geertz, it was only in the 1990s that a choreomusical research, also known as choreomusical studies or choreomusicology, became established, aiming to develop research methods for analyzing relationships between music and dance and choreographies, be it from a primarily historical or empirical analytical perspective, but preferably on the basis of close readings. Stephanie Jordan is an important pioneer in this field. Meanwhile, numerous publications within this field of research focus on one hand on Western stage productions, which are created for commissioned compositions or for pre-existing music, also primarily of Western provenance, and on the other hand on dance practices, particularly in eras of Western influence. Recently, there has been an increasing tendency not to distinguish between ethno-choreomusical and choreomusical studies in order not to emphasize the separation between Western and non-Western music choreographic phenomena, but instead to focus on overarching, you could also say, anthropological connections. Very promising is also the increasing growing interest of popular music studies and pop musicology in physical movements in the context of a live performance, both on stage and in the auditorium, and vice versa, popular dance studies concerning musical phenomena. These studies reveal eras that have so far been largely excluded from choreomusical analysis too. Spontaneous dance movements beyond specific forms and styles to live music events. Ultimately, contemporary dance performances do not only refer to scores that require a reading understanding of music, alongside the increased use of new music since the second half of the 20th century up to contemporary commissioned compositions. In this era of contemporary dance performances, as in theatre music in general, music improvisations and sound design has also become widely accepted along with electroacoustic and electronic music. And while film, TV and video productions at the interface of music and choreography have already expanded the stage perspective, sound installations that specifically work with movement impulses and choreography completely eliminate the traditional separation between stage and auditorium. Against this backdrop, it seems advisable to expand the so far established concept of choreomusical research with regard to these more recent tendencies and to speak of research into sound and performative movement, in which scholarly debate must no longer be interdisciplinary, that is, changing between individual disciplines, but transdisciplinary, that is, drawing upon different disciplines with regard to the object of investigation, which is music and sound and performative movement / dance. And here, as a starting point to map out such a field, I prepared an anthology which will be published this summer and will be open access open access, so no barriers. Might be a little bit self-promotion, but I promise it's much more for promoting the topic than the field than me. And questions about relationships between visible and audible movements remain key. For instance, how are music, sound, and body movements, dance, beyond established routines, related to one another in artistic creation, including rehearsal processes? What kind of models can be identified in this regard, and to which cultural context, aesthetic intentions do they correspond? What consequences do these results have for our perception, that is, listening and watching, respectively sensing motion, as well as for their analysis? And against this backdrop, I don't know, categorized. I don't want to categorize, but I just had the idea that there might be three tendencies. Translations is more an older concept, transformations is more modern, and participatory sense-making and oscillating agency might be contemporary. So this is just, we can discuss about that. So just my approach. And here I made I mapped out the field a little bit. And so translations are more literal relationships between music and performative movement since the beginning of the 20th century, with the flourishing of film industry, because I told you technological developments are very interesting to look at relationships between music and movement. And here I make a distinction between comparatively abstract structural procedures, on the one side visualizations as a visual kinetic charging of music, and musicalizations of movement. Kaya Zariahu, this example would be an example for the second point. And then there are procedures that tend to be semantically charged, where musical and sonically illustrations of movements happen, and on the other side, illustrations of music through movements are created. So it's always vice versa. And I have an example for almost every procedure. For instance, visualizations of music. So the music is the starting point, and then the structures of a composition are made visible through movements. And there, Oskar Fischiner is a very prominent protagonist of this tendency. I would say it was a real hype at the beginning of the 20th century. And for instance, he created several studies, and this would be one. Do you know that? No? Okay, so let's see. You can see it you can look it up at the internet, there's a lot of this stuff. This was an example for visualizing of music. Structures of a composition are made visible through movements. And musicalization of movement, where the movement is the starting point, and music is sonically intensified by music sound or noises. Here I would say Pina Bausch's Tanztheater, especially the later pieces, are very striking examples for this procedure. Shall I show a little excerpt here? I have to go. I have to make an internet connection. Sorry. Hotspot. Okay. Unfortunately, there are so less recordings available of the later pieces of Pina Bausch, so we can only have little excerpts, but they show already. Yeah, here we are. Especially her later pieces are made, are striking examples, I would say, for musicalization of movements. I could talk about this topic more, but I will go on. And then we have relationships that tend to be semantically charged. First, music sonically illustrations of movement and movements. So here the starting point is the movement. Music sound shall give additional comprehensibility or new meanings to emotion, action. And I would say, all narrative ballet, so almost 200 years ballet composition is a kind of musical illustration of movement. And and of course Mickey Mousing, Foley artists, these are all illustrations of movements, I would say. And the second tendency would be illustrations of music through movements. So the music is a starting point, and here movements shall give additional comprehensibility or new meanings to a musical action, a sonic event. And this happens very often in theater music, choreographic staging of films, videos, and a very striking example for this is Walt Disney Fantasia. And Oskar Fischer was also involved in the production of Walt Disney's Fantasia, but he was not very content because he knew very well that this is a commercialization of this tendency. And you can see that very well. Illustration of Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor, now colored with much more technological possibilities, but but still you can see his handwriting, I would say. Much more elaborated, but the element, the basic principles are the same. And he did not really like that, because then he was in the neighborhood of something like this, which was not his artistic intention. And he came back to Europe. And of course, yeah, there are many examples on the internet, and it's still, people are still excited about something like this. So at Christmas you have always these it's well done, it's no problem, but it's, on the other side it's quite why this is always so, people are excited about that. And so there is something. And it has to do with, I would say, cognitive processes. And yes, of course, I made these models, but the borders between these models are not so strict. There are often combinations of visualizations and illustrations. And you can make it very refined so that it's still very exciting. And for instance, there was an actor, I guess from Iran. During the Corona pandemic, he made a video of how to wash your hands. And this was a parody of the barbershop scene from Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator. And it was absolutely successful. And I was especially wondering why it was so successful. Because on one hand, it was very easy, visualization of structures and illustrating music. But on the other hand, he made it so well that, he got many followers. I don't know, millions. Do you know it? Just 1 minute, very well done. He did many of these videos years before. He wasn't successful, but just this video was millions of followers. And I was thinking, why? Why? Why are we fascinated by such simple stuff? Okay, so this was more the historical perspective. Now I come much more to postmodern procedures of models of interweaving sound and performative movement. And here we come to transformations, I would say. because the different materialities and medialities of music and performative movement are emphasized, and so then it comes much more to the to emphasize the difference between the two media or arts. They are not media but arts. And here I made three kinds of categories, but please be careful. There are no strict borders. It's always with fluid borders. And first would be interruptions or alienations. And here, for this particularly striking, are the early dance theatre productions of Pina Bausch, and she was obviously influenced by Bertolt Brecht's epic or dialectic theatre, which used so-called alienation or distancing effects, Verfremdungseffekte, V-effects. It's obvious that Bausch dealt intensively with this impactual device, which particularly suited to her early dance theatre aesthetics, in the course of developing the dance event The Seven Deadly Sins, 1976, to music by Kurt Weill and a libretto by Bertolt Brecht. In the immediately following play, Stück Blaubart, beim Anhören einer Tonbandaufnahme von Bela Bartoks Oper Herzog Blaubarts Burg, Bluebird, while listening to a recording of Bela Bartok's opera Duke Blaubart's Castle from 1977, the original music was intensely alienated by being stopped and repeated again and again. Ultimately, as an analogy to the drama of the piece, it is literally fragmented. Against this backdrop, Bausch arrived at collage techniques on the musical and on the dance level that would remain decisive for her further productions. The resulting and often striking recontextualizations or new connotations of music pieces became a trademark of her Tanztheater, and as such not only contributed significantly to her international breakthrough, but also profoundly changed the use of music in dance theater since the late 1970s. Here I have a little excerpt of Herzog Blaubart's Burg. Do you know it? Shall we look at it? Very short. Yeah, it's already blue. Okay, here. This would be an example for interruptions and alienations. Next would be in increased alienations, breakthroughs, and estrangements, and for this the variations 5 by John Cage and several others, but also with the Merce Cunningham Dance Company is a archetype for this model, you could say. Perhaps you know that, or shall we? But we have to look at the clock. Yeah. It's with sensor technique, and as soon as the dancers come to the sensors, they give signals to the computers. Perhaps I give a little bit. Yeah, it's very balletic, honestly speaking. You can see. And then I like very much when John Cage at the end. He really enjoys so far this example, but I would have a newer example for this setting, you can say. It's an oscillation between installation and performance. Edward's ear, Muybridge extended, an interface for composer, dancer, and musicians under the artistic direction of Penelope Verli in Berlin, staged at 3 different places. And this was for me a very interesting experience. I watched every performance, and within 1 year, and I really noticed how my perception changed, because it was really a strange experience at the beginning, and everyone was astonished. I heard composers at my side, they shouted, "Oh, this is not music." And someone told me from the ensemble, "Oh, great, this is a great experience. We didn't want to make music." So it was really interesting from a perspective, from the perspective of perception. And I can't explain the whole setting, but there were the musicians in one corner, the dancers in another corner, partition in between, so that the musicians couldn't see the dancers, but the dancers could hear the musicians. And the dancers had sensors on their body, 3 sensors, and of course gave signals to the musicians. And here you can see this display. It was a interactive score, and the musicians had kind of there were several preset playing instructions, several rules. It was not improvised, but it was also not purely interpreted, so it was something in between. And perhaps, and here you see the instruments. It was especially interesting that percussion was hardly used for rhythm, instead mainly produced soundscapes by means of clappers and sticks, also violin bows, sponges, tin foils, other pieces, and so on. And the bassoon were mainly the sounds produced by the bassoon were mainly respiratory sounds, and the moving of the valves. Electro guitar was primarily laying on the musician's thighs. We saw that just before, without being connected to the amplifier, instead operated with the amplifier cable, various sponges and knives, and so on. And perhaps we should also have a short look at this piece. These were projections, snapshots of movements of the dancers. These performances, I kept asking myself, how is the relationship between the music and the sound structured? When are sound creations initiated by movements and when vice versa? Could one actually speak of interactions between musicians and dancers, since the musicians couldn't see the dancers, instead interpreted data generated by movements of the dancers and translated via computer programs, and for each musician individual, with graphic scores on screens? Whereas on the other side, the dancers could listen to the musicians and could but must not react to what they heard. So I finally caught myself enjoying these movements when I thought everything is together. So I had the amazing impression that sounds and movements were precisely coordinated. However, this was actually quite impossible, since the movement data of the dancers recorded by sensors were intentionally delayed, so programmed with latency, and fragmented before they were transferred to the notation display of the musicians. So, this model, and the next model is interdependencies, with the special case of interferences, when music and movement overlap, but then they shift from each another and then they come together. So shift between synchronization and desynchronization, permanent shift between synchronization and desynchronization. Of course, here Anna-Theresa de Kersner gave the archetypes by her choreographies to music of Steve Reich, and perhaps you know that all. These choreographies, I guess. Keep it. But I want to show you something other, new, absolutely new, and this is important for me. The last category, big category, and this is participatory sense-making, oscillating agency, coming from basic assumptions from embodiment theories, embodied cognitive science, that our temporal spatial experience of movement, or our experience of time and space through movement, have a decisive influence on our musical experience, perception, our musical understanding. And I think this is a crucial point. And there are other crucial points. An essential prerequisite for this is our sense of movement, kinesthesia, which is generally of central importance for our learning, and more importantly for our living. We couldn't live without kinesthesia. We couldn't move without kinesthesia, and we move always. We need movement. This sense is not only responsible for our physiological coordination of movement, but is also crucial for our perception of ourselves and our surrounding world as well, and as well for the relationship between our self-perception and our perception of the surrounding world on the basis of movement. So this is very crucial. And embodied cognitive science offers theoretical analytical starting points for these phenomena, and especially the concept of participatory sense-making, oscillating agency, and here Hanneke Jäger is especially very, she writes a lot of articles on this topic, also for social context, so not only dance, but I think we should bring it to music and dance. And there is someone who brings this to music and dance, and this is especially Ingo Reulicke at the HZT in Berlin, and his wonderful ensemble, Art Interplay. It's based in Hannover. They work with drum drawings, electroacoustic wind harps, so they make the instruments for themselves. This is especially Jörg Hufschmidt, Joachim Zöpf with bass clarinet and soprano saxophone, and Ulrike Schöller, she makes one-shot video recordings. So I will give you a short example of this because this is for me also very crucial. And here I have to go back to the internet again.
Ich habe eine 1,0 bekommen dann in der Masterarbeit und der statistische Teil wurde sehr gelobt.
Sorry for this. Here we are. So this is an example for participatory sense making with oscillating agency. I can't explain it so short in such a short time, but when you see it, you will understand, I would say. And this is also a good example for kinesthetic listening. If you'd like to see more, just go at the web page of the ensemble Art Interplay. And for now, thank you very much for your attention.